2021, they appeared 35 times. Now, I want to make clear to the court, both Ms. Willis and Mr. Wade never denied that he had been to that condo before. The specific testimony that was elicited by Ms. Willis and Mr. Wade was that he had never laid his head, was the direct quote, at that condo, which these records don't prove that he laid his head anywhere. If you were to believe
upon herself to go to a historic black church in Atlanta, having not responded at all to the motion of Ms. Merchant's client, Roman. And she made what we now call the church speech. It was a calculated determination by Ms. Willis to prejudice the defendants and their counsel. How so? By making an issue out of the fact that the person that was challenged in the Roman motion was black, without telling the public or the church members, or anyone for that matter, that the reason that Mr. Wade was being challenged was not because he was black. It had nothing to do with race. It had to do with the relationship that had been alleged and later admitted to by Ms. Merchant.
She was the one playing the race card in a way to try to deflect from her own conduct. The relationship started in 2019. The relationship continued through 2020. The relationship continued through 2021. Looking at the cell phone communications, just in the first 11 months of 2021, over 2,000 calls, almost 9,800 texts. I don't even think love-struck teenagers communicate that much.
If you watched that at all, I mean, even a little bit, if you watched it at all, that was absolutely painful, man. And to quote Katie Tur from MSNBC, which I don't think that I've ever done, that was painful. At one point, she was asking, is this the best attorney that they've got in Fulton County, Georgia? And she's absolutely right, man. It was really, really hard to watch. There's no doubt about that. There's no change in that perception. But there were some really great points made. And really, as frightening as this sounds in the year 2024, they gave the judge a lot to think about. I guess what I should say, the defense gave the judge a lot to think about. The state, I believe the state did a pretty poor job. But that said, a lot of people were pretty disappointed and thought that maybe the judge would issue a ruling directly after hearing all the arguments. I didn't think that was possible, with so much case law cited and so many different truly concerning issues brought up. I didn't think that would be too likely. But one of the more interesting arguments made by the state, and I'll show you some good ones, man, because they had some good ones. They said that even the case law that cites just the appearance of a conflict all had actual conflict, and the state hilariously thinks that they don't actually have one.
what was shown through the testimony of all of the witnesses and through the evidence that Your Honor heard was that there wasn't an actual conflict, that the defense failed to provide any sort of actual conflict in relation to Ms. Wade's, I guess, the relationship that transpired from the relationship between her and Mr. Wade, and that there was absolutely no evidence of a financial benefit that she gained as it relates to the prosecution of this case and the ultimate outcome of the case. The corroboration of all of that is the things that Your Honor is very much aware that she could have, I guess, financially benefited from stretching out the case, for lack of better words, by the special grand jury recommended that 39 individuals be indicted. But through her sifting through the special grand jury's report and all of the evidence with the team that indicted the case, they only went with 19 of the defendants, which had she gone with all 39, based on the defense counsel's assertions, would have given her the opportunity to certainly find these financial gains that are claimed through the allegations of defense counsel.
So that was essentially the guy's argument and his tone and tenor throughout the entire day. I'm not sure what this guy's conviction rate is, but I can't imagine that it's too terribly impressive, right? Just try and follow his argument here. He says the proof that Fani Willis wasn't enriching herself was that she left so much potential ill-gotten gains on the table. And that defense, man, if you could even call that a defense, it just doesn't even make sense, especially because, as he said, she could have gotten more money from prolonging the case or making it more complicated, which is exactly what she did by turning it into a RICO prosecution, which is also probably why one of the many reasons they're so desperately trying to hang on to the case, because anyone who takes this case over is almost sure to disagree that this even qualifies as RICO. And check this one out. This is what happens when someone is speaking not from a position of fact, but a position of feeling, just willing the court to believe him just because it's something he said.
Now, the cases in which defense counsel has relied on in their briefs and here today, I would submit to the court the cites are misleading, are inapplicable, and some of them actually support the state's position. And what I would say to you is that the defendants, in many instances, combine language from the multiple cases and kind of what I would say is misstates the law as it relates to what the law or what is required in order for an elected district attorney and their office to be disqualified. And what I would submit to the court is...
Let's go back to that. Show me how.
Yes. Show you how.
So I think the first one they cited was battle versus the state. Certainly a conflict of interest or the appearance of impropriety would be the grounds of disqualification.
Well,
there were a number of these cases that seem to exclusively rely on the appearance of impropriety.
right.
So they acknowledge that there's some ambiguity here, that sometimes Whitworth gets cited to Ventura, and we've got this quote that comes up where it's just they only cite to an actual conflict that must be involved. They acknowledge the ambiguity. You're saying there's no ambiguity whatsoever.
I am saying that, and why I am saying that, why I would submit that to the court, is in all of those cases, they do reference the appearance of an impropriety, but they reference that because they also find there's an actual conflict in each one of those cases.
So your position would be, your review of the case law, there's never been an appellate opinion that relied only on an appearance of propriety.
As it relates to a prosecutor or a district attorney, yes, that is what I'm saying. What I would say is in those cases, they do reference the fact that there is an appearance of impropriety, but they reference that fact because when you have an actual conflict, there's always an appearance of impropriety. And those are what those cases stand for. And I guess that is the main example of what I reference as they kind of combine the language from separate and different cases and tell you that the standard is an appearance of impropriety. And I would submit to the court that is not the standard.
I mean, it looks like the judge is picking on the poor guy, but he's not. I mean, it's just that unlike the internet, you can't just say anything you want in court and just expect people to believe you. And this guy says they misstated the law, and the judge says, okay, I'll take that. Show me how. And the guy pauses for what must have felt like an absolute eternity if you're him. And he says, show you how. And I almost feel sorry for the guy. Actually, no, I really do feel sorry for this guy. You know, what a position to actually be in. The guy's a prosecutor. He's forced into the terrible position of trying to protect his boss from being outed for what is, at best, a very, very serious conflict, and at worst, actual crimes, right? This guy's career, it's probably going to end up being a casualty of this. And so I think, well, Terrence Bradley's, you know, and I think the lessons learned from Bradley are keep your mouth shut if you don't actually have the fortitude to follow through. The man told the truth about something that he knew, and he didn't like what that turned into. So he evaded, he concealed, he lied on the stand. And for what? This guy is going to be professionally ruined over this. And, you know, on top of him, on top of all the damning text messages and the geolocation data, now there's a pretty interesting voicemail that's been released that I think proves once and for all that at least part of Bradley's testimony was bogus.
And this guy was listening to the testimony, including Terrence Bradley saying he hadn't spoken to Nathan Wade in 2 years. Well, this waiter drops the following voicemail to Ashley Merchant. Listen.
I'm calling. So I just watched the Terrence Bradley hearing, and I noticed on there he said that he hasn't talked to Nathan Wade in 2 years. But I work at a restaurant here on the square, and I waited on Terrence, B.C. Chopra, and Nathan Wade about 5 weeks ago.
We've reached out to this person, and he has told us after Nathan Wade joined Terrence Bradley and his lawyer, Chopra, who's mentioned there, at the table, that the waiter introduced himself to Nathan because Nathan Wade was the only one he did not know on a first-name basis. Watching the hearing, he was surprised to hear that they, quote, have not spoken in years.
What do you even say to that, man? It's things like this that make it interesting, right? And alarming to watch some of our liberal friends whose faith in Fani Willis and faith in all things anti-Trump is just unshakable. I mean, it truly is amazing what 24/7 propaganda can do to a person's ability to think. I mean, anyone reasonable, anyone objective would look at this entire case in the aggregate and just recognize that it is as corrupt and as broken as a criminal case could possibly be. And still, there are people that can actually watch things like this and think that these things strengthen their position.
And as I was doing a whole lot of research, I came upon this law review article from Cornell scholarship reading or publication. And they made very clear that courts have been relatively reluctant to exercise their power to disqualify prosecutors for any reason. And that goes along with the standard what the state would submit to the court is that the defense has to show an actual conflict. And in this instance, they have to show the actual conflict would be that Miss Willis received a financial benefit or gain and did it got it based upon the outcome of the case.
Just think about what Abadi's argument is right there. His response to the dozens and dozens of established case law that the defense has cited was to say, oh, in all my research, I found an article from Cornell University that said that judges never disqualify district attorneys. Probably news to the judge. I'd guess he must have, in that moment, been thinking either one of two things. Either, well, shit, bro, why didn't you Google that earlier? We could have skipped this entire show. Judges don't do this. Or, more likely, he was thinking, is this freaking dude serious? And he wasn't the only one thinking that.
I should also note you were the deputy DA for Fulton County, so you understand this courtroom, or like courtroom. I'm struck by this lawyer is kind of hard to watch. As a layman, it's kind of hard to watch. Is this the best the DA's team has to put up?
I will say, Adam Abadi is a very good attorney. He mainly, from my understanding, and I've been gone a little while, tries murder cases. And so when you're talking about these kind of nuanced arguments, I don't know if this is something that he's used to presenting.
That's pretty funny. What do you think about it, man? That's pretty funny. Even the people who believe, no matter what, that Donald Trump is guilty of anything and everything, and the state can do no wrong, even those people watched that and thought to themselves, this is awful. This can't possibly be the best attorney that they've got in that office. And really, the guy, he's in way over his head, right? And I have to wonder, is the fact that he was hand-chosen, is that just even more evidence that Fani Willis is not a real DA, that she's just a political activist masquerading as a prosecutor? Because it's either that, or she was also just not impressed. And you have to imagine, she knows that she's finished after watching that guy work. But that's the interesting thing, right? Even with things as objective and as reasonable as laws and rules and ethics, it's still something that different people can watch and really just see two entirely different things. It's freaking amazing.
The burden of proof in Trump and companies is on the Trump's lawyers here. They have the burden of proof. They have to show a preponderance of evidence that there's a conflict of interest. Based on what you heard, did the defense meet that?
They came close, but I'm not sure that they did. You have to base it on the testimony that was heard. And as the prosecution pointed out at the end, the defense didn't really get to the point that they were going. There are assertions that have been made. There are assumptions that are being made. But when did the relationship start? Look, I will agree that the appearance is not good, but that's not what the question is going to center on. And as the prosecution was arguing, it's not the appearance of this misconduct, but an actual misconduct that the judge is going to have to decide if that's what the standard is. And in a courtroom when you have to base it on evidence and testimony, I even on a preponderance, we're not even talking about beyond a reasonable doubt, I think, Elizabeth, even on a preponderance, they didn't quite get there yet.
Yeah, John, do you agree?
Not at all. And as a matter of fact, if I wanted to prosecute and convict Trump, I would want to see Fani Willis out of there as soon as possible. This is a self-inflicted wound. She has now caused the appearance of bias.
That is a great point. I mean, what a freaking concept. If you're a leftist and you really believe that Trump is guilty and you really, really want to see the man in some sort of dirty Georgia jail cell before he even has a chance to trick voters into firing the greatest president in history, Joe Biden, then you should actually want Fani Willis gone immediately. In fact, you should probably be absolutely livid that she would risk this entire case, risk the entire prosecution, instead of just stepping aside and recusing herself, which she could have done a long, long time ago. But they don't have that thought because this case has never, ever, ever been about that. It's about damaging the man. This is not about justice. And no one in Georgia is more willing to damage the man at the expense of justice than Fani Willis.
She's made inflammatory statements in defending herself about racism. All of this might infect the jury. And when I was a prosecutor, and as David was, the last thing you want is the jury to feel there is bias. You as a prosecutor have to strike hard blows but fair ones. And once the jury thinks there's something wrong or tainted about the prosecution, it's not a good thing. One of the things that's happening here is this whole spectacle has opened up this case for possible a change of venue. I'm not sure the jury pool hasn't been infected here as this goes viral and there are charges of racism. And you're going to have a jury here that's, primarily black. And this is not a good thing. If I were a defense lawyer, I'd yell to high hell, especially if Fani stays on the case.
You jump all over that. David, the state argued that there was no proof that Willis and Wade lied about when their relationship started. They say it was after she hired him. And the allegations the affair began earlier is nothing more than gossip and speculation. And the attorney said that this was all an effort to harass and embarrass Wade. That's a quote right there. What did you make of that argument?
That's the best argument they have. Look, I don't disagree. There is a really bad appearance going on here. It never should have gotten to this point, but this is a sideshow as to what's going on here, and that's exactly what the defense wants. That's going to cause this case to be delayed, and as pointed out, they're going to look here to change venue now.
Yeah. And that's everything right there. Even the guy that believes the prosecution, even the guy that thinks the whole Disqualification Act is a show, even he can acknowledge that the state, their only argument is that this is about damaging and embarrassing the district attorney. And he says that that's what the defense wants. When I disagree. I think to anyone that actually watched this, anyone that's paying real attention, I think it's apparent that the defense only wants justice, actual justice, like real justice and real fairness to be done. Their position is if you're going to charge someone with something ridiculous, at least play fair while you do it. But that's just my take, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, be a part of our growth. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel. I'll see you in the next one.